Hey guys, Drifter here. Today I've got a video for you about the best weapons in Warzone Battle Royale. This is technically an in-depth episode like the others, but I'm kind of reworking my branding here, so we're going a little bit light on numbers and a little bit generic on the thumbnail, though that may change in the future, and we'll probably have an intro too. Enemies in the Battle Royale have much more than the normal 100 health that's common in multiplayer. Instead, they have 250 health when fully armored up, and this changes all of your time to kill calculations in very surprising ways. Logically, you would want to think that weapons that kill fast at 100 health will also kill fast at 250 health, but that's not necessarily true, and some weapons that weren't very good in multiplayer are excellent here in Battle Royale. Ranged combat is also going to be much more important because you're going to have a lot of long-range fights. Exclusive Ace did some testing and he said that the range numbers seem to be inflated over normal multiplayer, or that they had much longer ranges. However, when I talked to developers, they told me that it should be the same, but either way, range is an important factor. Ace also said that he attempted to test headshots on bots. His results were inconsistent, but said that headshots generally seem to have the same multiplayer multiplier. However, developers told me that the Battle Royale has a higher headshot multiplier, but the answer is the same either way, that headshots are super important either way and just massively cut your time to kill in this mode, especially since you have more health, so they're always worth going for. And don't forget that having things like extended mags or sleight of hand can be very, very clutch too, since you're going to be fighting multiple enemies. There are some fast time to kill weapons that are not going to be on the list today, because I decided to play with all of these guns first before I give you advice about any of them, and I'm glad I did that because I thought Battle Royale would value slow classes and extreme range, but I found myself needing more speed than expected, so I had to alter this episode a bit. But let's start off with weapon number one that you've already seen plenty of gameplay of. That is the AUG SMG, or the AUG A3, but there's a catch to it. You can't just run the AUG SMG, you have to run the AUG with the 5.56mm ammo attachment. You can do the 30 or 60 round mag. This has the fastest fully automatic time to kill in the entire game. Of all the weapons that just shoot full auto, this one kills by far the fastest, and this is the most important and most awesome thing about the AUG. It has relatively low recoil too, a relatively fast rate of fire. It's easy to control, it's easy to shoot with, you'll get your hits on very easily. Because it's an SMG, overall it's going to have very fast handling, and it can be kitted to have decent range if you put on a monolithic suppressor or the longer barrels. I prefer the mono suppressor because it doesn't hurt the range quite as badly. And this is probably the best gun for Battle Royale, a weapon that was largely ignored in base multiplayer, especially the 5.56 ammo that was kind of wonky for a long time, is absolutely top tier for Battle Royale. This is the best close quarters weapon. It's a decent rifle substitute, and I generally don't prefer to run the 60 round mags on it because it slows down my movement speed running from the gas and slows down the aim down sights time. I'd rather go with the 30 round mags and sleight of hand, but this is a top tier weapon. It kills incredibly fast. Do not underestimate the AUG, and you definitely want to have it in your drop kits. Next up today is the FN-FAL. It has a slightly faster time to kill than the AUG, only by a few milliseconds, and it has an overall super fast time to kill when you look at the TTK charts. This weapon is not as popular in base multiplayer because it's semi-automatic, and it tends to lose out to people that spray. However, in Battle Royale, it really shines. This weapon has absolutely fantastic range, among the best ranged weapons in the game. The accuracy is top tier, it's very difficult to beat, and if you're going to run a sniper or thermal or long-range zoom sight on it, it is a very serviceable DMR and not the worst sniper rifle alternative. You can pop people super far away with the FAL and deal significant damage per shot. But what's more interesting is that you can also kill people very quickly in close quarters combat, especially if you have a good trigger finger. Headshots are utterly savage on this gun. If you're good enough to get them, you can make people think that you're literally cheating if you shoot them in the head enough times. I do admit that this gun takes a little bit more skill to use than most, but I talked to Exclusive Ace about it and he assured me that even on console, where it's slightly more difficult to aim, it's an absolute monster of a weapon. The FAL does have bad hipfire, and I will admit that it is more difficult to use in close quarters combat, if not still effective. Not an easy weapon, but if you put the time into it, it can be extremely rewarding. This is one that I love to run the VLK sight on that we will talk about later, and generally most of the range increasing attachments, along with a slightly larger mag magazine so that ammo isn't as big of a concern. The next assault rifle I want to talk about is the AK-47 with the regular ammunition. I know one of my last in-depth episodes was about the AK with the ammo conversion being one of the new best weapons in the game, but for Battle Royale, one of the best weapons is the regular AK with 7.62 ammo. This has a slower time to kill than the FAL or the AUG that we've talked about, but it is still in the top echelon of time to kill weapons for rifles. The regular 7.62 ammo deals more damage and kills faster than the 5.45 x39mm rounds despite the rate of fire increase. The AK-47 just as a weapon in itself also has fantastic range in the assault rifle category, excellent bullet ballistics, and depending on what barrel you put on it, it can be surprisingly low recoil too. I will admit for the AK-47 that it does shoot a bit slower than the other weapons. It's not as snappy and responsive up close, and the flinch can be somewhat frustrating, so you do need to be a decent player to make use of this weapon. It's not easy to use, but it's definitely worth putting the time into if you don't like things like the FAL. My recommendations for it would be to run a balanced build where you've got a nice mix of range increasing attachments, optics, and some maybe faster ADS, but also run sleight of hand so that you can reload really fast and minimize your downtime. The next weapon today is a shotgun, and you wouldn't expect to see a shotgun in the best weapons on Battle Royale, but I'm telling you, the R90 is an absolute monster of a weapon. In Warzone, pretty much all of the shotguns are good, surprisingly good, because players have so much health, they're kind of expecting to tank in fights, and they're very rarely expecting you to put them to bed in 1 or 2 shots, which most of the shotguns will do. However, among them all, the R90 stands alone at the top as king. The R90 can definitely one-shot players if you're close, if you have good aim or whatever, but it's most often going to be a 2-tap pretty similar to multiplayer. One strategy difference for multiplayer that I think is very important is that you need to aim down sights more frequently with the R90. In multiplayer, since your health is less than half of Battle Royale, it's just fine to just hip fire, double tap somebody and be done. But in this mode, if you're doing hip firing, unfortunately the R90 can be sometimes a 4 or 5 shot kill. However, when you aim down sights and you hit all of those pellets in that nice tight little spread, it puts people to dead very quickly. And I like this shotgun the best of all because it has a huge tube so you don't have to reload it, and it has a long consistent damage output. The Model 680 and the Model 725 both deal more damage and have better range, and they're definitely better for downing one person, but only the R90 can wipe squads. If you're running something like the 725 or 680, you'll shoot a person and then you'll have to reload or pump another round, and then you'll have to shoot their body so they don't self-revive while their teammates rush in there, and they're going to give you a very hard time. However, with the R90, you can go tap, 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 and you can do that 7 times to put 14 rounds downstream that deal almost as much damage, and it is much better at wiping out full teams. And the R90 is just a fantastic backup weapon to have. It's not going to be your primary, but it's a great backup. Next up on ease of use and simplicity, I want to talk about the MP7. For a common gray pickup with no attachments, the MP7 is extremely viable and easy to use. Time to kill on this weapon is slower than the AUG, and it's slower than the MP5, which we'll talk about later, but I think the ease of use makes up for it. It has a 40-round magazine, it has very low recoil, very consistent recoil, it has surprisingly good performance over range, fantastic iron sights, a fast reload speed, a fast movement speed. I tend not to run overkill in my drop kits so that I can take more perks, so usually I'll take my one custom weapon and then throw away the pistol and take my trusty MP7 for a backup. Of all of the early game weapons, this one is by far my favorite. I would much rather have an MP7 than a SCAR, M13, or MG34. I'm telling you guys, if you just don't have anything else, the MP7 is a just premium top tier grab. It goes a very long way for a gray weapon. While we're talking about weapons that shoot fast, let's talk about the Ram 7. The Ram 7 has a very similar time to kill as the AK-47, putting it among the fastest killing assault rifles in Warzone, and it will deal less damage per shot, but more than makes up for it with a really high rate of fire. The Ram 7 is going to have lower range than the AK, but in my opinion, it is much easier to use than the AK, and it's just a bullet hose. It can be kitted to be very fast and reflexive in handling with a 50-round magazine that has minimal penalties to your aim down sights and movement speed, and minimal penalties to your range as well. I'm not going to say that this weapon's super easy to use. I very much so have struggled with it on console. Recoil is very high, so it doesn't tend to perform as well as the AK and some of these others at extreme range ranges. However, I find the recoil very workable on PC, and for those of you that have better thumbs than me, you'll probably find it easy on console. This is my favorite close quarters combat rifle in Modern Warfare. It just works great up close, and it's one of the very few weapons that I use red dot sights on. As you've seen in a lot of the gameplay, it's irons or like mostly long range zoom sights, but the Ram 7 is just a really nasty gun to use up close because of that time to kill and that extreme magazine and rate of fire, and having a red dot sight on it just makes it easier to use. You may ask why you would even use the Ram 7 when the AUG is going to have faster handling and a faster time to kill. Very simple reason for that is that while the AUG SMG with 5.56 ammo is nice, it just doesn't have that amazing of a range, and it doesn't have that amazing of an ammo capacity. You've only got 30 rounds before you need to reload, so having a weapon that does have better range and has a larger magazine is nice. You could run a Ram 7 and an AUG if you just want to be a close quarters monster. Let's move on to another popular weapon, the MP5 with 9mm rounds. Controversial opinion here, the MP5 with 9mm is superior than 10mm. Now, the 10mm rounds do not have a faster time to kill than the 9mm in this mode as far as I'm aware, so that already makes them less appealing. However, they do have a significant range increase. You will get better range out of your 10mm rounds than your 9mm rounds, but long range isn't really your optimal MP5 range in Warzone. I use the MP5 as a close range melting machine. It's very powerful, it's very effective up close. It kills faster than the AK-47 and the Ram 7 up close, but not quite as fast as the AUG, and it's especially nasty with headshots. Instead of 10mm rounds, I prefer to run the 45 round 9mm mags on it, so I just have more ammo and I can just reload really fast with sleight of hand and just keep pumping people close range. Next up, let's briefly talk about the PKM. My gameplay on this one isn't as excellent as I wanted, but this is just as excellent in Warzone as it is in Ground War. The PKM has a fast time to kill overall in this game. It's among the top tier. It has excellent range, low recoil, and is just very easy to use overall. You can use it as a DMR if you just have to. The bullets don't drop that much. You can put a gigantic magazine on it if you want 200 rounds, so you never have to reload. The reason I don't use it as often as some of these other weapons is because it is a slower handling weapon. You're going to run a little slower, you're going to aim down sights a little bit slower, and for me, most importantly with this one, you swap weapons way slower with the PKM, which makes it more difficult to swap back and forth between long and close range when I'm getting third party. However, if you like to play slow and you like to play conservative and hold power positions, there's not many guns in the game that are going to do a better job than the PKM, and even if you have to use it in close quarters combat, it's still got a great time to kill. Next to last today, let's talk about the Growl 5.56. I'm only going to talk about this one briefly because I think that there is an argument to be made that it doesn't deserve to be on this list. The Growl has a slower time to kill than the M4A1, and the base weapon has worse recoil. So why would I recommend this over the M4? Well, it does have some absolutely amazing barrel attachments that massively boost the range on this weapon and lower its recoil to a very ridiculous degree. With the right attachments on the Growl, this can be an extremely long-range punishment machine. You can very consistently get long-range, fully automatic hits on people and beam them with the Growl, and it's going to maintain its good damage over a pretty solid range. The only downside is that it's just slightly uncompetitive in close quarters combat when it comes to time to kill. Very usable, very killable, but some of the people using these other weapons will kill you faster, but the Growl is great for long range suppression. And number 10 today is actually not going to be a weapon. I just wanted to talk about your sights. The old days of red dot sights being absolute king of everything are over. Red dots just don't have the range that you need in Warzone. Personally, I prefer the VLK optics on most of my weapons. They have a minimal impact to your aim down sights time, very clean sights, and a nice 3x zoom so I can use them a little bit at range, and they're not too zoomed in to use up close. Variable zoom optics are very premium too. I'm seeing more players use these. They have slightly slower aim down sights time than what I prefer, but do offer a lot of utility. Thermal and thermal hybrid are super meta right now. You can see through smoke, you can spot people at long ranges because of the draw distance thing. Like, the thermal thermal will see people beyond the draw distance, so that's super nice. It can be hard countered by cold-blooded, and I think that they're overall a little bit slow to aim down sights and a little bit awkward looking down the sights, so they can be a bit hard to use, but they still offer a lot more utility than just the base red dot sight. So choose your optics very wisely, and be sure to at least have the option for increased zoom. It's frustrating when I kill people and I want to loot their gold weapons and they're just running a bunch of red dot sights when I really need some sort of hybrid or VLK or something. Just make sure that you have at least one sight in your kit that has decent zoom on it. And yes, red dot sights are just fine for close quarters combat weapons, but they're not going to work too well for anything else. Guys, that is all for this video. I hope that you enjoyed it. I hope that you learned something useful. If you did, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe. Drifter out.
Yep, he's downed. Oh. That one's gonna be low as well.
There's another squad fight.
Gone on a roof. Yeah. Another squad.
Your teammate was sent to the cooler.
Alright.
Claymore sent.
Got him.
To the AO.
Alright. I'm on my way back.
Stitching them up.
Bounty target down.
Behind me? In the bathroom? Camp in the bathroom?